Hi Year 4, now for chapters 13 and 14. And chapter 13 is called Shut Your Face. Who on earth is he? Inquired Mr. Stern as Mr. Stink trudged around in his filthy striped pyjamas to the back door. There was silence for a moment. Mother's eyes bulged out of her sockets and Annabel looked like she was about to shriek or vomit or both. Oh, here's the tramp who lives in our shed, said Chloe. The tramp who lives in our shed, repeated Mother. She looked at her husband with black fire in her eyes. He gulped. I told you she was hiding something in there, Mother, exclaimed Annabel. He wasn't there when I looked, protested Dad. He must have concealed himself behind a trowel. What a wonderful woman you are, Mrs. Croom, said Mr. Stern. I read about your policies on the homeless, about driving them off the streets. I had no idea you meant we should drive them into our homes and let them come and live with us. Well, spluttered Mother, lost for words. I can assure you I'm going to write an absolutely glowing piece about you now. This will make the front page. You could be the next Prime Minister of the country. More sausages? Said Mr. Stink as he entered the dining room. Excuse me, said Mother before putting her hand over her mouth in horror at the smell. Forgive me, said Mr. Stink. It's just that I asked your daughter Chloe for some sausages 2 hours ago, and my sincerest apologies, but I'm getting rather peckish. You say I could be the next Prime Minister of the country, Mr. Stern, said Mother thoughtfully. Yes, it's so kind of you allowing a dirty old smelly tramp like this. I mean, no offence. None taken, replied Mr. Stink without hesitation. To come and live with you. How could you not be elected as an MP now? Mother smiled. In that case, she said, turning to Mr. Stink, how many sausages would you like, my very good friend who lives in my shed and hardly stinks at all? No more than 9, please, replied Mr. Stink. 9 sausages coming right up, with poached eggs, bacon, mushrooms, grilled tomatoes, bread and butter and brown sauce on the side, please. Certainly, my extremely close and beloved friend, came the voice from the kitchen. You smell so rank, I think I'm going to die, said Annabel. That's not nice, Annabel, said Mother breezily from the kitchen. Now come and help me in here, darling. There's a good girl. Annabel ran to the sanctuary of the kitchen. It stinks in here now as well, she screamed. Shut your face, snapped Mother. So tell me, tramp, said Mr. Stern, leaning in towards Mr. Stink before the smell got to him and he leaned back. Is it just you living in the shed? Yes, just me, and of course my dog, the Duchess. He's got a dog? Cried Mother anxiously from next door. And how do you find living here? Continued Mr. Stern. Nice, said Mr. Stink, but I warn you, the service is painfully slow. Chapter 14, Lady and the Tramp. Lady and the Tramp was the headline. Mr. Stern had been true to his word and the story had made the front page of the Times. A large photograph of Mother and Mr. Stink accompanied the piece. Mr. Stink was smiling broadly, showing his blackened teeth. Mother was trying to smile, but because of the smell, she had to keep her mouth firmly closed. As soon as the paper boy put the paper through the letterbox, the crumbs pounced upon it and devoured it in a frenzy. Mother was famous. She read the article out loud with pride. Mrs. Crumb may not look like a political revolutionary in her smart blue suits and pearls, but she could well change the way we live our lives. She is standing for MP in her local town, and although her policies read as very hard line, she has taken the extraordinary step of inviting a tramp to live with her family. It was all my idea, said Mrs. Crumb, pronounced Croom. At first, my family was dead against it, but I just had to give this poor, filthy, flea-ridden, dirt-encrusted, stomach-turningly, smelly beggar man and his abhorrent hound a home. I love them both dearly. They're part of my family now. I couldn't imagine life without them. If only other people were as beautifully kind-hearted as me. A modern-day saint, some people were saying. If every family in this country was to let a tramp live with them. It could solve the problem of homelessness forever. Oh, and don't forget to vote for me in the forthcoming election. It's a genius idea and could put Mrs. Crumb in line to be the next Prime Minister. The tramp, known only as Mr. Stink, had this to say. Please could I trouble you for another sausage? It wasn't your idea, Mother, snapped Chloe, too angry to merely sulk. Not strictly speaking, dearest, no. Chloe glared at her, but at that moment the telephone tinkled. Well, get that, will you please, someone? It's probably for me, said Mother grandly. Annabel dutifully picked up the phone. Croom residence, who is speaking, please? She asked, just as her mother had instructed her to. Mother even had a special telephone voice, a note posher than her usual one. Who is it, dear? Said Mother. It's the Prime Minister, replied Annabel, putting her hand over the mouthpiece. The Prime Minister? Squealed Mother. She held herself towards the television. Mrs. Croom speaking, said Mother, in a truly ridiculous voice, a good note posher than even her usual telephone voice. Yes, thank you, Prime Minister. It was such a super piece in the newspaper, Prime Minister. Mother was drooling again. Dad rolled his eyes. I would be delighted to be a guest on Question Time tonight, Prime Minister, said Mother, and then she went quiet. Chloe could hear a murmur from the other end of the line, followed by silence. Mother's jaw dropped open. What? She growled into the phone, losing her poisoned dignity for an instant. Chloe looked at Dad questioningly, and he shrugged. What do you mean? You want the tramp to go on as well? Said Mother, incredulous. Dad grinned. Question Time was a serious political discussion programme hosted by a Sir. It was Mother's big chance to shine, and she obviously didn't want it ruined by an old tramp. Well, yes, went on Mother. I know it makes a good story, but does he really have to be on too? He reeks. There was another pause while the Prime Minister spoke, the murmur getting a little bit louder. Chloe was impressed with the man. Anyone who could get Mother to stop talking for a moment deserved to run the country. Yes, well, if that's what you really want, Prime Minister, then yes, of course I'll bring Mr. Stink along. Thank you so much for calling. By the way, I make a very moist lemon drizzle cake. If you're ever passing by on your battle bus, I would be delighted to offer you a slice or two. No? Well, goodbye. She checked one more time that it had definitely gone. Goodbye! Chloe rushed into the garden to tell Mr. Stink the news. She heard a "Rrrr" and assumed it must be the Duchess. However, it was actually Elizabeth the cat who was growling. She was looking up at the roof of the shed where a trembling Duchess was hiding. The little black dog was yelping softly. Chloe chased Elizabeth away and eventually coaxed the Duchess down. She patted her. There, that nasty puss has gone now, she said. Elizabeth flew out of the bushes and through the air like a kung fu kitten. A terrified Duchess rocketed up the apple tree to safety. Elizabeth prowled along the trunk, hissing malevolently. Chloe knocked on the shed door. Hello? Is that you, Duchess? Came Mr. Stink's voice from inside. No, it's Chloe, said Chloe. He's nuts, she thought. Ah, lovely Chloe, do come in, dear heart. Mr. Stink upturned a bucket. Please take a seat. So, did your mother and I make the newspaper? You're on the front page, look. She held up the paper and he let out a little chuckle. Fame at last. And that's not all. We've just had a call from the Prime Minister. Winston Churchill? No, we've got a new one now, and he wants you and Mother to go on this programme called Question Time tonight. On the television box? The TV? Yes. And I was thinking before you go on, Chloe looked at Mr. Stink hopefully. It might be a good idea if you had a... Yes, child. Well, yes. She finally plucked up the courage to say it. Bath. Mr. Stink looked at her suspiciously for a few moments. Chloe? he asked at last. Yes, Mr. Stink? I don't smell, do I? How could she answer that? She didn't want to hurt Mr. Stink's feelings, but then again, it would be much easier to be around him if he was introduced to Mr. Soap and his charming wife, Mrs. Water. No, of course you don't smell, said Chloe, gulping the biggest gulp that she'd ever gulped. Thank you, my dear. Why do people call me Mr. Stink? In her head, Chloe heard the intensely dramatic music from Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. This could in fact have been the £1 million question, but Chloe had no 50-50, no ask the audience, and not even a phone a friend at her disposal. After a long pause, in which she could have watched all 3 Lord of the Ring films in their specially extended director's cuts, words started to form in Chloe's mouth. It's a joke, she heard herself saying. A joke? Asked Mr. Stink. Yeah, because you actually smell really nice, so everyone calls you Mr. Stink as a joke. Really? His suspicion seemed to be thawing a little. Yeah, like calling a real small man Mr. Big or a very thin person fatso. Oh, yes, I understand. Most amusing, chuckled Mr. Stink. The Duchess looked at Chloe with a look that said, you had the chance to tell him, but you chose to carry on the lie. How do I know that the Duchess's look said this? Because there's an excellent book in my local library entitled 1000 Doggy Expressions Explained by Professor L. Stone. I digress. But, said Chloe, you might like to have a bath. Well, just for fun. So, the question is, does he have a bath or not? We'll see next time.